unlocked it, so hopefully it looks support the whole thing.
Thanks.
Okay, cool.
Okay, let's get started. GRC intro, go.
So, GRC, does anyone know what it stands for?
All of you are in the group.
Yeah.
R is for?
Relationship, and then C, control, fab. Yeah. So there's 5 sort of sections that you can do. So the SR test, which is social responsibility, you have to pass that to build the SR1. There's 3 levels of it. To be able to do any of the drive sports, there's 4 drive sports: flat mill, wall climb, spring pull, and weight pull. For the social responsibility test, 3 levels, but there's 3 sections in each one. So SR1, which I'm going to start with. The first section, basically, you are on a flat buckle collar and a 6-meter line. You will also say what your middle position is before you come in, but we'll get to that in a second. So you will enter through the gate. That means scoring starts. You can't have any reward objects on you once you pass through the gate, so no toy, no food, anything like that. They've all got to be left through sort of in the warm-up area. You'll walk on a loose lead up to these 3 cones, which will have people at them. At one person at a time.
Feel free to come closer to if you can't hear. Like, bundle up.
One person at a time, so you'll go to the first person, greet them. Hi, I'm Jodie, this is Duffy. Shake their hand. You'll then move on to the next one. For all 3, the aim is that your dog doesn't obviously jump up on them, anything like that. They can sort of sniff them, but they just can't sort of try and bowl them over, basically, or maul them, or whatever. Not ideal. You would lose points for that. Once you've gone through those first 3, you then go on to figure of 8. Again, that's on a loose lead, and it'll be around these 4 camp chairs. So you've got to do it 3 times, going round, and once you've gone around those 3 times, you can then reward your dog, and that would be through personal play, praise, something like that. Again, obviously you've got any reward objects on you, and that's section 1. For the points section, as long as you don't have any leash pressure for more than 3 seconds, there's no points. If your dog sort of stops and sniffs, but if you continue to walk and they just come with you, that's no points. If there is pressure on the leash for more than 3 seconds, that is 5 points. If it gets to 6 seconds, that's 15 points. If it gets to over 9 seconds, then that is an NQ.
You're out.
Okay, that's it, done. So, but yeah, keep walking and it's grand. They'll follow you.
Does the dog need to be in a focus heel?
No. So, however, if your dog is like to maul someone, just put them in a heel. That's 15 points for them to be in a focus heel for the whole section. When you lose 15 points, you start with 100 points, and you need 70 to pass. So you still have 15 points to play with then. So if you think they're going to sort of just be a bit wild, jump off someone, things like that, you're basically trying to be socially responsible. So if out in public, when you go and greet someone or ask them for the time or something like that, and you need to put your dog in a heel because that is acceptable, then that's what you would do. And you just lose some points, but it's still responsible. Any questions on that section? So the dog cannot do the toilets throughout the whole test, otherwise you're it's an NQ, non-qualifying. Basically, if one dog pees, the chances are then all the other dogs are going to pee. So yeah, in the warm-up area, make sure they pee and they poo. And that way you don't have to worry. Also if, sorry.
Do you have another question?
Yeah. So every time you ask for a sit, that would be 5 points. That's a command. So basically, any commands you give, they aren't sort of asked by the judge for you to give. we'll get to that in the obedience section, they'd be 5 points. If you said sit and also a hand gesture, then that's sort of 2. So one voice like cue and one hand gesture cue, like either one is 5 points. All right. Any other questions about that section? No?
If you train your dog to default sit when you stop.
Move fast.
Move fast is strategy.
Take a couple steps.
They naturally sit, that's fine.
No, so if they sit at all. So it's like you almost are in default sort of obedience at that point, if that makes sense. So they're meant to be sort of, the aim of this is if you're like walking along in the park and you have to go up to someone to be like, oh, you've just dropped something, or like, oh, what's the time? Or if someone comes over to you and says, oh, can I? They're not in default obedience at that point. You just want them to be able to manage their life without.
Make good decisions.
Yeah, exactly.
But not sit.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that would be the ideal picture, right? If the dog doesn't have any obedience or anything like that going on, and they can just exist and just
Yeah.
walk around without any input, that's the ideal picture, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you see that they have to sit to manage, it's a bit of a compromise. That's still the reasonable thing to do, but they're not 100% just.
Yeah.
Doing their own thing.
So if your dog needs to do that, then you can have that as a strategy, and then
And that's a
you
better
could still
strategy.
pass. If they jumped on someone,
Yeah.
that's an NQ. So it's better that they sit and you lose 5 points
Yeah.
than just instantly.
Yeah.
So
I get what you mean.
yeah. All right. Any other questions? No?
All right.
Grand. So the second section is the obedience section. So that's where, when you enter, you would have said what your default middle position is. So the middle is obviously when the dog's in between your legs. Normally it's a stand or a sit. Once you've sort of said which one you are using, when you're in the obedience section, that's what the dog's meant to do. You will lose points if they don't. I've had that
If they do the
before.
wrong position.
Yeah, so if you say your default position is in sit, but then they stand when you ask for middle, then you would lose points in that, just because it's not sort of clear picture, basically. But that's where you train for it before, so it's fine. So basically,
Could they also do it down as a default position for middle?
you can do it down if you want as well. You do have to do steps and maneuvers, so it's a bit more difficult for your dog, but if that's what you feel is strongest for your dog, then just put it on different. So after you've had your little personal play, make sure your dog doesn't lead or bite any clothes during personal play. Apart from that, just obviously tell them they're great. What cones are we using?
It's the second cone.
This one.
So the big cone after the figure 8. Should you walk over?
Yeah, we'll come over. It's very far away to see. This one in what a little bit? For the middles and the front.
Yeah. This is the down, so it's got the long line.
Oh, you're just in what about the middles and then recall
So-
to front.
Yeah, so
Just
someone's
putting-
putting the long line on first before.
So they're just using like a random bit for the second part.
Yeah, exactly. They just have to go however far the long line lasts.
Yeah. That's fine. So, on your personal play, the judge will then ask you to step on the line. We have a fake line here, which is the cone.
On a real test, it'll be
It
a
would be a
spray paint.
yeah. So it'd be a spray painted line. In front of that, there would be a cross. So just got to use your imagination today. So you come, step on the line, stand ready for doing your middle. If you ask for a middle and do that, that's a cue. You're stepping out. So stand with your legs apart already. The judge will then. Yes. Oh, sorry, you're just coming closer. The judge will then ask you to call your dog to middle. At that point, you then ask for a middle. They would then ask for, so there's 3 steps, so a step forward, a step to the left, and a step to the right, using your imaginary lines. They are helpful. So you take a step forward, judge then asks a left or a right. Handy to know your left and right. So it's like you're driving a car, because I get it wrong all the time. So left, and then right. Once you've done that, Your dog needs to sit or down or stand for each turn. You'll be asked to down your dog. Ask your dog to down. This is when you would, so in this scenario, because there's no barrier between the spectators and the dog, there will be a long line. You'll attach your long line and then take your lead off. I always think of it as like, you gotta put something on to take it off. You can't take it off and then there's nothing. So yeah, pop your long line on, take your lead off, stow your lead on your person. So whether it's around you, in your pocket, something, don't just leave it lying, because otherwise later on you're not going to be able to reattach your lead. Once your dog's in a down, it's in a 2-minute down stage. So the ideal picture is they're in a sphinx position. If they sort of drop a hip or something like that, that's kind of not ideal, so you lose a point. But again, see how it is. If they have anything like hip dysplasia or something like that, they can have sort of medical exemptions, but that needs to be done before the test, and it might be where they are allowed to do that, or you can do a sit stay or something like that. For the middle as well, if you've got like a Great Dane, you can get an exemption for them to be in a heel rather than a middle, instead of you riding them. Not ideal. So you do your down stay, you then leave your dog. The judge will ask you to go out of sight, and that is for up to 30 seconds. So for here, that would be behind, we'd probably do it behind the shelter there. Your dog has to be able to stay in their down stay for that period of time. If they sit up, but they're still within that area that they have been put in a down stay, you lose points there, but you wouldn't be sort of disqualified and queued. If they come out of their little sort of bubble parameter of their down stay, then you'd be NQ'd. Imagine it like you've put your dog in a down and then you have gone to help someone across a road. If they come out of where they're in a down, they're then on a road, which is obviously not ideal. So that's kind of the best way to think about it. If they stay within their bubble, you will lose points, but it's not going to be where you're NQ'd. But if they come out of that bubble, then you're NQ'd, because that's not safe. After you're out of sight, you'll come in and there'll be the dog distraction. So that's where unknown dog comes in through the gate with their handler, comes up to the cone area. They will, the chairs actually. This is quite far away. Where's the chairs?
Yeah, exactly. So it needs to be personal space.
The dog shouldn't be able to reach it if it does come out. If the dog in the downstay does get up to go towards the dog, the handler needs to try and stop the dog. The judge will also try and stop the dogs through sort of social pressure or something. And also the dog that's come in has to go out the gate. But in here we have the long line, which should also stop. If it was a completely enclosed, there may not be a long line, but we still have those three for the dog's handler, the judge, and the handler of the other dog to try and separate, basically. So you have to go over to the dog while your dog's in the downstay. You also have to speak to the dog and pat the dog. So quite tricky, but it's great. So if you see an off-lead dog running up to you, you can put your dog in a downstate. You can go collect that dog, give it back to the owner, sort of thing. That's sort of the idea of why we're doing this. Once that's happened, there's then two distractions. So sort of like a startle type distraction and a temptation distraction. So it might be one might be sort of we throw a chair or make some sort of loud noise, and the temptation one might be where you put some food in front of the dog or wave a tug around or something like that, where the dog might be like, oh, that's quite cool, I'm going to go there instead of staying in my down. So that's the two distractions, and then that will be 2 minutes in total. Once that's done, you're then asked to come to the imaginary line over here.
Second imaginary line.
Imaginary line, which also has a cross behind it. And this is where you will ask for your recall to front. Okay, so your dog's in your down over there, ask for a front. The dog doesn't need to have a contact front, it just needs to have a front where you can reach their collar and attach their lead. So it doesn't matter if they're not touching you, but as long as they're not sort of that far away, your feet are planted on this line, they need to be close enough. Okay, once you recall them to front, at any point in the front section you may be asked to attach your lead and unattach the long line throughout, whether it's straight away or when you're doing your steps. The steps are take a step back, turn to your left and turn to your right. Your dog needs to stay in a front position straight the whole time. So when you're turning, they should be turning with you and sort of repositioning in a straight position. If they are squint, you'll lose points. If the dog doesn't come with you, or if you need to cue each position change, you lose points there as well. Again, if you think about it, so you ask your dog to front and they don't, sometimes adding a hand lure, which is 5 points, can be helpful. You're really helping your dog there. Whereas if you say front again, that's 5 points, and then you still need to lure, so that's another 5 points. Okay, just try to just think of these strategies throughout the test, thinking about what sort of your dog is strongest at, like what's their strongest help basically. Once that's done, you've reattached your lead and you've taken off your long line, the judge will then say section 2 complete, play with your dog, and again you can start with your personal play for that, and that's section 2 done. Okay, any questions?
What happens if you throw your leash on the ground?
NQ. Because if you've taken your lead off and popped it on the floor, you definitely can't reach it from here. So, done. Always put your lead on you, never put it on the floor.
You mentioned that you can't do the drive sports until you've done the SR. But
Yeah.
what's the relationship between the SR and the drive? Why would you need to do
So
this to be able to do the drive?
So all the drive sports have a sort of a control aspect as well. You need to be able to show that you have your dog is able to not, like basically, so you need to have control of your dog before you do the drive sports. The drive sports are sort of high energy, your dog's sort of more likely to, it's basically harder for them to be able to do it as they're asked. So if you're sending your dog off to the spring pole, you don't want them running and getting the judge instead.
Like a safety,
yeah,
getting the
it's
judge
pretty
not
much,
saying hi
yeah,
to the judge.
It's basically, yeah, a safety aspect that you're able to sort of, you're able to loose lead your walk up to the spring pole because they're able to control themselves and you have enough control with them that they're just not in danger basically. So yeah, it's just a safety aspect that you, to be able to prove that you can control your dog before you do this. Yes.
Can you practice drive sports or do mock trials before passing your SR?
Yeah, so you can practice the drive sports, you can do mock trials of the drive sports, it's just you can't be able to actually enter a proper competition until you've done your SR test. So yeah, you can do and practicing the SR test around a drive sport is great. Really hard but great. So it helps just to sort of,
My dog always pees over everything, so he'd fail.
but again, you can sort of put things on cue and sort of the context can really help. Like they start to understand what they're doing and that they know, oh, we're working essentially, so they don't. Any other questions about that section? Yep. Yeah, so at the start you get asked to show your flat collar and your 6 meter leash. 6 foot. Yeah, it's American. 6 meters real long. 6 foot leash. Flat buckle collar and 6 foot leash. Yeah, but you can practice on anything. It's just you have to be able to do the test in a flat collar. Yeah. Any other questions? No?
All right, section.
Cool. So the last section is liberty. So here we have a flexi.
By the cone.
Which is over by the cone. But it might be where it's on a long line. If it's an enclosed field where the spectators are also sort of behind a fence, it may be where it's completely off leash. This section is basically you tell your dog all done, and they're able to, for 2 minutes, just be a bit of a chill dog. They can potter about, they can sniff. Imagine if you had like your dog at a barbecue or something. You don't want them like running, jumping on people, trying to steal everything, just being wild basically. You want them to be like just mooching about, sniffing around, just, you know, they can interact but they just can't be wild. You can sort of pet your dog for 10 seconds maximum, step away. There should be a period of time, sort of 10 to 20 seconds or so before you then pat them again. So you can interact with your dog, but you can't give them any cues, whether that's verbal or like hand gestures. If it's where it's on a long line or a flexi, if they reach the end of that, the leash pressure rules apply. They should be able to understand, you know, if they have that restricted barrier, that they don't, that they respect it still. So exactly the same. You've got your over 3 seconds, over 6 seconds, over 9 seconds. Again, no toileting on the field. Questions?
What happens if you have a dangerous dog that you can't trust to be at liberty around the judge?
So again, you can have your you can put them in a downstay or something like that, where it is obedience that you're sort of putting them in. But again, you lose 15 points, similar to with your sort of heel in the first section. So if you have a dog that you can't trust around people or other dogs or anything like that, and you're like, right, I need to be able to put them into heel throughout section 1. They then do all their obedience perfect. You then have to put them in a down in liberty. You can still pass, because that's 15 points for section 1. 15 points for liberty because they're in a down, so that's 70 points, and you need 70 to pass. So you can still pass with a dog that sort of you feel you need to do that if they're not socially responsible without being in that obedience, because it's showing that you're being socially responsible by having those sort of things in place. Any other questions?
Nope.
No?
Okay.
So after the 2 minutes, you then have personal play again. The judge will be able to go over all your scores. Again, don't let them bite your sleeve, anything like that, until you're off the field. And then you can toy, food, whatever you want.
When do you put the leash on after liberty?
Oh yeah, leash on after liberty. Leash on, long line off, or whatever, and then go. And that's at the end of the 2 minutes. So the judge will say, okay, pop your leash on, that's you done, play with your dog.
Any other questions? Cool. All right, we'll get started.
Nice.